Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I want to talk about the value of physical media to a filmmaker. Because over time we've seen this trend towards streaming services and building stuff for streaming services. Now obviously with streaming services, the cut just isn't as big as they would get from a physical media release. But let's analyze it a bit because I've done a tiny bit of research here, so I've actually put a bit more thought into this video than I would typically do in any of my other videos. There will still be some opinion in here, but it will be done in a way that is engaging and gets you thinking. So let's look at a movie like, look, physical media allows a second stream of income to the filmmakers. So you look at something like Good Will Hunting when they were making that, and Matt Damon says on Hot Ones, and I've got the exact quotes over here, but let's have a hear from Matt Damon. Matt Damon said, "You know you had the DVD coming behind the release, and 6 months later you'll get a whole other chunk. It would be like reopening the movie, almost when it went away." Yeah, it would be... Sorry, I'm paraphrasing here. I'll get it exactly right. It would be like reopening the movie almost. And when that went away, it changed the type of movies we could make. And then he went on in that episode to talk about Behind the Candelabra, and he said, a movie like Behind the Candelabra had to make $100 million just to break even. And this is without Blu-ray, that came out late in the cycle of streaming had already been prominent for years at that point, when Behind the Candelabra came out. But we're looking at this as like, this is where the industry is at the moment. Like, the industry is hurting because they can't make experimental movies, and you keep... To film buffs and others in the industry who say, why do they have to make all these franchise movies? How many times can we see Ghostbusters? How many times can we see Godzilla? How many times can we see Planet of the Apes? And yes, they are good movies. But how many times are we going to see the same franchises over and over and over and over and over? Well, to tell you the truth, they just can't afford to make stuff like experimental movies. Now, the exception to this is stuff like A24 when they made The Whale, and that was a really cool movie, by the way. But they get experimental because they know that their return will be smaller, but they're also knowing that they can try to justify it because, yes, it is on streaming as well, but they will... Something like A24 will be big in the home physical media market. They will try to push it on Blu-ray first. They will try to give you the best possible experience by that Blu-ray. But yes, the cost fee return is a big equation for most studios. Someone like Disney obviously decided that physical media was not worth their while, so they cut it. And that is understandable. They would have done a simple equation that would have been like, how much are we paying to produce this thing and ship it from point A to point B and then get it into the hand of the consumer? Okay, we're paying that much. Okay, and what's our return per DVD? Oh, maybe about a few dollars, $1 something. We don't know exactly. I'm just guessing at this point. Estimate. This is an estimate. But Disney would have looked at that simple equation and said, yeah, we're earning money from it, but is it worth staying in that outlet? And also it cheapens Disney Plus because you can go out and buy it. Now, I have a big opinion on that. I don't think physical media physical media doesn't cheapen the streaming experience at all, but this is how the big streamers see it. If it's on physical media, it might hurt people who come to Disney Plus to watch it. And obviously, look, if you have a Blu-ray version of Star Wars, The Mandalorian, or Obi-Wan, or Andor, then yes, you would probably go for the Blu-ray versions before jumping on Disney Plus. I get that. But the cost of entry is a lot higher. Those Blu-rays cost me a good chunk of change. I had to import them through my contacts. But I've got them on my shelf, and I had to pay a much bigger upfront cost to own them. But the thing is, I own them now. They are on my shelf, they belong to me, and I can have them at a second's notice. And people who say, oh, you're just hoarding at this point. Hoarding is a lot different to collecting. Collecting is all shown. I've got it organized. I'm not just chucking crap all over the place and saying, okay, I need to put stacks of DVDs here. I've got to stack them all around and keep them all. No, I'm actually looking at downsizing some of my collection. Like, there are some DVDs I've got that I've replaced over and over again, and I've still got the original copy just because that version is unique. But I'm looking at downsizing some of those and like being, okay, this DVD has kind of been replaced. Maybe I should donate this or give it away or something. I mean, I know there's these little pop-up Blockbuster pop-up Blockbuster boxes and pop-up boxes around where people put movies in, and I might decide, hey, I might put some of my movies in there so collectors can have a chance. And, people trying to sell them aren't going to get much anyway, so I don't think that's a big issue of people trying to come into the boxes and take everything and try to sell them. I mean, they might, but who knows? I don't think they would get more than 10 cents. And here to them if they can get 10 cents, but who cares? So yeah, I am looking at downgrading some aspects of my collection to make room for stuff I actually like the Blu-rays. But look, the cost fee return might not be there for studios. And we get to something like the home physical market, where the filmmaker's intended vision can be translated better through a physical means. So someone like Christopher Nolan, for example, went on to say at a screening of Oppenheimer in Los Angeles, he went on to say, give me 2 seconds. In the case of Oppenheimer, we put a lot of care and attention into the Blu-ray version and trying to translate the photography and sound, putting that into a digital realm with a version you can buy and own at home and put on a shelf, so no evil streaming service rather, can come and steal it from you. So yes, Oppenheimer, where is it on my shelf here? It is up the top, up here somewhere, and I'm not going to get it out because it's up the top. But yeah, something like Oppenheimer, that is, the 4K version of that is going to be as close to Nolan's vision as the cinematic release. And yes, it's not 70mm, it's not IMAX shot, it's not the exact what was seen in cinemas. But Christopher Nolan has supervised it. He has looked at it and he has said, yes, this version is good for home media, and let's put this out on Blu-ray. Because internet across the world is different. My experience with internet in Australia might be different to people's experience in rural Alaska. It might be different to people in mainland USA. It might be different to people in Badtown, USA. Who gets that reference? It might be different to people in Europe. It might be different to people in Japan. Internet is different all over the world, and everyone has different bandwidth and different commitments on internet and different things. Whereas the Blu-ray of Oppenheimer, that is Christopher Nolan's intended vision. As long as you have the means to play that disc, it will have the bitrate, it will have everything needed to play Nolan's original vision in its intended form, signed off on by the director and translated to the medium by the director. Something like Lord of the Rings as well. The Lord of the Rings trilogy had been moved across onto 4K recently, and Peter Jackson himself supervised that transfer. And yes, there were things done in that translation that some fans didn't like, digital noise reduction being one of them. But Peter Jackson said, yes, this is the experience that I believe should be on 4K, and I believe this is the best representation of my film on this medium. And yes, Legolas having DNR, he does look a bit like a wax figure, as did Arnie in True Lies. I was going to say Top Gun. That would be a bit of a weird movie, Arnie in Top Gun. But yeah, True Lies, Arnie in that with James Cameron had a lot of DNR. But it didn't enjoy my overall experience with watching that movie. I enjoyed watching that movie, and it looked great to me. And yes, I did understand there was wax figure-y look to it, but it also meant I still enjoyed the movie. I did notice it, but I also was like, yeah, it's still an action movie. It doesn't really hurt the movie to me. And it is leaps better than my DVD version that I was watching for years. With Lord of the Rings, it is a bit of a weird one because Blu-ray was so good that the 4K is like, okay, we got some DNR. I've kept the Blu-rays around behind these bad boys because these are double layered, so I've got the older replaced Blu-rays behind them. So I keep Lord of the Rings there just in case I want to go back and watch the one without DNR. That being said, I think Lord of the Rings on 4K is beautiful. And it doesn't hurt the quality to have a bit of DNR done. Or the enjoyability and the overall look of the film. Peter Jackson has supervised it himself, and he has signed off on it. Now, the director is not always right, George Lucas. George Lucas. Love Star Wars. Please put out the theatrical releases. Because post-1997, the theatrical releases of Star Wars haven't been seen, and I'm not going to go into that topic because we're talking about what it means to the physical media means to the filmmaker. So yeah, the intended experience from the director can be translated better on a physical medium like a Blu-ray or a 4K. That being said, there are stuff you just don't get on streaming, like the extras, behind the scenes documentaries. Like the thing I love about Cameron releases is that you get the behind the scenes, you get these special documentaries with it. Something like Titanic had 20 years later, where you could watch a documentary where James Cameron analyzes the thinking of the Titanic, and the Blu-ray had a special one as well, like 100 years on, where he'd done the same thing. There are documentaries with that associated with those releases, and yes, there might be some of those might be on streaming. A lot isn't. There's a lot of deleted scenes that you don't get on streaming, and this is why I am a fan of physical media. I can go into the deleted scenes, I can go into the so on and so forth, and people might say, "But YouTube's there. Why don't you just stream it for YouTube?" YouTube doesn't support the original creator. Sorry to tell you, but that is a form of unless it's uploaded by the studio directly, it's a form of piracy, for lack of a better term. I used to call it the Jolly Roger, but people know what I'm talking about, and I'm not encouraging it, so as long as I'm not encouraging it. But you know, that is not official. The Blu-ray is official and has been signed off on by James Cameron, as is Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings has been signed off on by Peter Jackson. Oppenheimer's been signed off on by Christopher Nolan, and it is as close to their intended vision as possible. And they're also higher quality versions. So obviously, as I mentioned, the bit rate, everyone's internet's different. So in different parts of the world, you're going to see different internet speeds. You're going to see different ways that streams handle bandwidth. Whereas a Blu-ray player, if you put the DVD, Blu-ray, or whatever, the 4K in that player that can play it, it's going to be the same every experience as long as you have the means to play that disc. So it's a better version of the intended vision, and as close to being what Christopher Nolan would have laid eyes on. It is as close to that as possible. Now, what happens when an episode or a movie might not have enough bandwidth, might not translate well to digital? Well, this is where something like Game of Thrones Episode 3, Season 8, Episode 3 comes in, called The Long Night. Now, that was about the battle for Winterfell, and with that episode, a lot of fans were complaining when it first released because there was a lot of artifacts. It was a very dark episode, like shot dark, like it was a very dark look to the show. And what happened was people jumped on the internet and said, we can't see what's going on. Like, it is so dark, you can literally not tell, because of the artifacting, what's actually going on. And then you get to something like 4K Blu-ray or even the Blu-ray, and you can actually see the action. You can see what was intended because it's not at the mercy of the internet. It's got its own disc that, as long as you can play that disc, it can display it as the studio were intending, or in this case, Warner Brothers or HBO were intending it to be seen. So bandwidth was a lot better on the home video version of that, and it is the definitive way to watch Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 3, which honestly, I know we had the terrible ending of Game of Thrones, but like, Episode 3 feels like that should have really been the finale. They should have saved that for the last episode, and obviously you need to have Daenerys have a thing at the end or whatever. They shouldn't have even leaned into that. They should have just done like, obviously we have to see a payoff to that story though, but yeah. Episode 3 felt like what was supposed to be the final episode of Game of Thrones, and that's where a lot of people just stopped watching. A lot of people did watch the end of it, but now when they go back to that, it's like, oh, we don't want to see the very bad ending of Game of Thrones. We'll just finish at Episode 3. And I've seen a lot of people say that. Like, they're just like, oh, you know, beyond Episode 3, I don't really care about Game of Thrones. I'll just watch it up to that point and then just finish. Because people have decided that they don't want to see the end of Game of Thrones. It's that bad. But, you know, this is what I mean about physical media. It can translate better the filmmaker's vision. And I think that is why it's important. It also preserves the vision of filmmakers. So, like, something, as I mentioned in a previous video, what happens when a studio decides, hey, you know, this release of 13 Reasons Why It's a very graphic depiction of, I can't say the word, but it's a very graphic depiction in that bathtub scene. But that has been removed from the streaming version now. The only way you can have that version officially is on DVD. And, you know, there are other unofficial means out there that you can get it. But the DVD is the official version of that, where you can still watch the original cut. Pun intended. But yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what these streaming services are going to do. And the value of physical media to the filmmaker also means that they get a bigger return, and they can translate their original vision as close as possible to how they were intending. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think, and I will catch you in the next one. Like, subscribe, drop a comment, and I will catch you soon. Peace.